The power of disappearing. Welcome back to the channel Inner Stoic Voice. I'm glad you're here today because we're diving into a concept that can radically change the way you approach relationships. One that's often misunderstood, but incredibly powerful when practiced with intention. Imagine this. What if the most profound impact you could have in a woman's life wasn't through constant pursuit or over-explaining your worth, but by simply stepping back? What if disappearing from her life, intentionally halting the chase for her attention, is not just a break but the key to creating a lasting, unforgettable impression? This isn't about manipulation, playing games, or withdrawing to punish someone. It's about something far more subtle and far more powerful, creating space. By stopping the chase and stepping into silence, you begin to shift the dynamics in a way that forces the relationship to deepen, not because of what you're doing, but because of what you're not doing. When you stop seeking her validation, when you cease trying to prove your worth, you create room for something greater than validation: respect, presence, and clarity. You stop being a distraction and become a presence that commands attention without ever having to demand it. Silence, when used consciously, has the power to resonate in ways that words can't. Think about it. When you're constantly seeking attention, constantly texting, explaining, or compromising your energy to be seen, you're draining the relationship. But when you stop, when you pull back with peace in your heart, you create depth. She begins to feel something she may never have before, the weight of your absence, and in that space her mind starts to wonder. It's the mystery, the unanswered questions, the unexplained void that begins to consume her thoughts. You're no longer chasing after her, but now she's chasing after the reason why you've stopped. You see, we live in a world where everything is loud. Constant chatter, constant engagement, constant validation. But silence, intentional, calm, composed silence, is rare. And that rarity makes it profound. It's not a void that creates distance. It's a space that fosters reflection, introspection, and a deeper connection. When you withdraw not from anger or ego but from peace and self-respect, that's when things begin to change. It's not about abandoning her, it's about giving her the opportunity to see you, without the noise, without the distractions, without the performance. So as we go through this, think about the power of silence, not as an absence of communication, but as a tool to deepen connection, create respect, and allow space for something real to grow. Let's dive into what happens when you disappear, not to punish, but to transform the relationship into something more meaningful. Stay with me, because the shift in mindset is about to get real. Let's break it down step by step. Part 1. The effect of silence and absence. Welcome back to the Inner Stoic Voice. If you're here today, it's because you're ready to explore something that's not often talked about: the power of silence and absence in relationships. What happens when you choose to stop the chase, step back, and create space? It's not just about disappearing. It's about creating a powerful shift that goes unnoticed at first, but has profound effects as time goes on. Now let's break this down day by day so you can truly understand how silence doesn't just fade into the background. It leaves an impact that no words could ever convey. Day 1. The absence is barely noticed on the first day. Nothing really changes, at least on the surface. She doesn't panic. She doesn't feel like anything's amiss. Your absence is like a gentle breeze passing by, barely noticeable. She might even think that you're just caught up with something, or maybe you're just taking a little break. It's natural for her to assume that this is just another temporary shift in the cycle. After all, in relationships, we're conditioned to expect that the patterns we're used to will continue, right? But here's the thing. This is where most people would rush to send a message or check in, thinking they need to fill that space. The key here is not to force it, not to explain, and not to make her feel like you're chasing for validation. Instead, you allow that moment of absence to be what it is, an opportunity for something deeper to develop. Now, take a moment to reflect. How many times do we in relationships fill every space with words, actions, or constant attention? What would happen if we just let things be, without rushing to fill every silence? Day 2 to 3. A subtle shift. Begins by days 2 and 3, things start to feel a little different. It's not dramatic, but it's noticeable. Imagine you've been a consistent presence in her life, someone she could always count on to send a message, make her smile, or keep her company. Suddenly that's no longer there. The void doesn't scream at her, but she starts to sense it. She doesn't panic yet, but her mind begins to wander. She might find herself scrolling through old messages, checking your social media profile, just to see if you're still there. But here's where it gets interesting. Even though she's looking for signs of you, she's also trying to convince herself that it's no big deal. Maybe you're just busy, or taking some space for yourself. She doesn't want to make it into something bigger than it is. At this point, she's not exactly worried, but she's starting to feel something she can't quite name. It's that small, subtle shift. The absence of your presence starts to weigh on her mind. Now here's a thought for you. Why do we spend so much time avoiding these small shifts, when in fact it's these moments that could lead to a much deeper understanding of ourselves and others? The key to this stage is patience. No need to rush in or fill the silence, just let it simmer. Allow it to play its role. Day 4-5. The absence. Begins to feel heavier as we move into days 4 and 5. Something starts to change in her. The absence doesn't feel temporary anymore. It feels permanent. In those quiet moments when she's not busy with work or socializing, she feels the weight of your silence. Imagine how it feels when you sit alone at night, and the absence of a good night message hits a little harder than you expected. Or when you're out with friends, but there's no one to share that inside joke with. That's when it hits. She doesn't want to admit it, but she feels a little more empty. She might check her phone a few more times, hoping to see your name pop up even though she tells herself it's not that important. This is when the absence begins to create real space. And here's the twist. This space isn't just empty. It's filled with questions. She may not even know she's doing it, but her mind starts wondering, is he okay? Did I do something wrong? Why hasn't he reached out? In those quiet moments, you're no longer just absent. You've left a void that can't be ignored. And it's in that void where the real shift begins. The silence doesn't just feel like absence anymore. It feels like something missing that she can't quite name. But here's a question for you. How often do we in our relationships fill that void with unnecessary words or actions just to make the silence comfortable again? What if instead we let it breathe and allow both ourselves and others the space to think, reflect, and grow? Day 6-7. Doubt and uncertainty. Begin to emerge. By days 6 and 7, she's no longer just noticing your absence. She's starting to feel the weight of it. The uncertainty creeps in, and with it doubt. Did I misread him? She might wonder. Maybe he's just not as into this as I thought. The control she thought she had over the situation starts to slip away, and, with it, her confidence in the relationship. What's interesting here is that this is the tipping point. It's the moment when silence starts to do its real work. It no longer feels like a temporary absence. It feels like something has shifted. And for her, that shift is unsettling. She begins to question everything. Did I say something that made him pull away? Was I not enough? The silence makes her think, but it also makes her feel vulnerable. It's not the rejection that's painful. It's the lack of clarity. She doesn't know where you stand, and that ambiguity is far more unsettling than a harsh confrontation would be. Now think about this for a moment. How often do we search for answers in relationships when maybe, just maybe, the most powerful answer is found in the space itself? The moments where we don't rush to fill the void, but instead let the silence reveal what's truly important. So, as you sit with this, ask yourself, how would your relationships change if you allowed silence to work for you, instead of always trying to fill every empty moment? The key takeaway from these first few days is simple yet profound. Absence isn't always about what's not there. Sometimes it's about what is created in the space that silence leaves behind. It's not just about disappearing. It's about making a space so powerful that it forces both you and her to see things from a new perspective. As we continue, you'll begin to see just how this absence plays out day by day, and how over time it builds into something that can completely reshape the dynamic of any relationship. So stick with me, and let's dive even deeper into this powerful process. Part 2. The Psychological Shifts and Growing Realization. We continue our exploration into the power of silence in relationships, focusing on the deeper psychological shifts that occur when you choose absence over constant presence. Now, if you've been following along, you've seen how silence starts small, just a subtle shift in the rhythm of things. But what happens when the silence goes from being a temporary gap to something much deeper? Something that starts to stir fear, doubt, and reflection? Let's break it down step by step and see how the absence, that peaceful silence, starts to transform not just the relationship, but the way both of you perceive yourselves and each other. Day 8-10. Fear begins to set. In by days 8 to 10, things are no longer just a small shift. Now they're starting to feel real. The absence that once felt temporary now feels like something has been lost. Imagine this. She's been navigating her days, perhaps thinking that you'd eventually show up, that you'd return to your regular pattern. But now it's been over a week and there's no sign of you. The first stirrings of fear begin to surface. It's not the dramatic kind of fear. No one's throwing tantrums or having emotional breakdowns. Instead, it's the quiet kind of fear that grows in the spaces between thoughts, in those pauses during her day when she wonders, what if he's really gone? At this point, she's starting to feel the weight of your absence in a new way. It's no longer just a temporary pause, it's a sense of loss even if she doesn't want to admit it yet. She might catch herself wondering what happened. Why haven't you reached out? Are you really okay? Or have you just moved on? But here's a key point to reflect on. How often do we, in relationships, rush to fill the silence because we're scared of what it might reveal? What if instead we allowed ourselves to sit with the silence, to feel the fear and see what comes up? Could it lead to a deeper understanding of ourselves and our connections? Day 11-14. Her ego. Cracks by days 11 to 14, that fear turns into something else, something deeper. Her ego begins to crack. She starts to replay past interactions in her mind, analyzing every conversation, every moment. Did she miss something? Was there a sign that she didn't catch? Was she too dismissive, too guarded? Her mind starts to second-guess everything. She might even begin to wonder if her assumptions about the relationship were wrong all along. What she thought was solid, what she thought was in her control suddenly isn't so clear anymore. And that's where the ego comes in. Ego doesn't like to feel powerless or uncertain. It thrives on control, on knowing the answers, on understanding where things stand. But here's the rub. Silence doesn't give the ego the comfort of certainty. Silence forces her to sit with the unknown, to face the possibility that she doesn't have all the answers. And this, friends, is where real growth happens. Ego wants predictability. It wants control, but it doesn't always want the truth. When you allow space, when you create silence, you allow the truth to rise to the surface. And it can be uncomfortable. It can be humbling. Have you ever experienced that moment in your life when your ego was forced to face the truth, when everything you thought you knew crumbled away, leaving you with nothing but the raw reality of what was really going on? It's painful, but it's also necessary. Because only in that moment of discomfort does real transformation begin. Day 15-17, curiosity grows but pride keeps her away. As we move into days 15 through 17, things begin to change even more. At this point, curiosity starts to grow. The silence has gone on long enough that she's beginning to wonder, what's really going on? The questions have shifted from, where did he go, to, what is he thinking? Does he miss me? Or perhaps even, has he found someone else? But here's the catch. Even though the curiosity is growing, her pride holds her back. She doesn't want to reach out, not because she doesn't care, but because she doesn't want to appear vulnerable. Pride tells her that if she reaches out, if she makes the first move, she'll lose control. And control at this point feels like her last remaining defense. So instead of reaching out, she does what we all do when we're unsure, but curious. She checks your social media, replays old messages, and tries to piece things together in her mind. But reaching out? That would mean surrendering some of the power she's clinging to, even if it's just an illusion. It's interesting, isn't it? We often let pride control our actions in moments of uncertainty, even though it's pride that keeps us from the very connection we're craving. It's the fear of vulnerability, the fear of being the one who cares more that holds us back. But imagine if we let go of that fear. What if vulnerability wasn't a weakness, but the strongest thing we could offer? Day 18 to 20. Fear that you may never return. By days 18 to 20, something shifts again. This time, the fear takes on a new shape. It's not just about wondering where you've gone or what's happened. Now she's starting to fear that you may never return. The silence has become a stark reality. There's no more hope of a sudden text, no more thinking you'll come back to the same place you were before. The silence forces her to face a harsh truth. Your withdrawal wasn't a tactic, it wasn't a game. It was a sign of self-respect. And here's where the real shift occurs. Your absence isn't about punishing her, and it's not about forcing her to miss you. It's simply about creating a boundary. You've decided that your peace and your self-respect are more important than constantly chasing after validation. And that's what she's starting to realize. You see, when you stop chasing and start choosing yourself, it's not just about protecting your own space. It's about teaching others how to treat you, how to value you. And when she realizes that your absence is a reflection of your own self-respect, it forces her to reassess everything. Her own role in the relationship, her assumptions about your value, and even her sense of control. So let me ask you, when was the last time you stood firm in your own self-respect? When did you last allow yourself to step back, not as a way to punish, but as a way to protect your peace and your worth? The power of silence is not just in what it does to others, it's in what it teaches you about yourself. Conclusion. In these days of silence, everything changes. From fear to doubt, from curiosity to realization, the absence becomes the teacher. It challenges the ego, it humbles pride, and ultimately, it leads to a deeper understanding of self-worth and respect. When we stop seeking validation from others and start valuing our own peace, we create space for something more meaningful. And that's when the real shift begins. Stay tuned as we continue exploring the powerful effects of silence in relationships. Part 3. Her response to the changed dynamic. So far, we've explored how silence, when used strategically, can create a powerful shift in a relationship. But what happens when the silence, the absence, starts to shift the dynamics in ways that neither of you expected? What happens when the person on the other side, the one who once had all the control, starts to change their approach? Not out of desperation, but out of true reflection? Let's break it down and take a deeper look at how her response evolves over time. Day 21 to 25. She begins to strategize. By days 21 to 25, she's not just passive anymore. She's starting to feel the change, and it's not something she's willing to ignore. The absence has settled in for long enough that she can no longer brush it off as something temporary. Now she's beginning to strategize. It's not about grand gestures, and it's not about coming at you full force. No, it's more subtle than that. She starts testing the waters. Small gestures. Maybe she posts something on social media, a quote or a photo, hoping it'll catch your attention. Perhaps she casually texts you, but it's not really about the message itself. It's more about seeing if you'll engage, if you'll respond. She might even drop a comment on something you posted, just to see if there's a spark, a hint of the connection you once shared. But here's where it gets interesting. These small gestures reveal something profound about the changing dynamics in the relationship. It's no longer just about her sitting back and waiting for you to return. Now she's taking action, but it's not from a place of urgency or desperation. It's from a place of curiosity and reflection. She's not trying to force anything, but she's also not willing to be left in the dark forever. This is where relationships begin to shift. You see, when someone has always been in control of the connection, they usually know how to keep things moving. But when that control is disrupted, it forces both people to reassess their approach. For her, these small gestures are an attempt to test the waters, to see if what she felt was real, and if you're still on the same page. But here's the question. Have you ever tried to reconnect with someone after a period of silence just to test the waters, to see if they still care? What did you learn from that experience? Was it about the connection or more about seeking validation? Day 26-30. She's deeply invested. Now, by the time we get to days 26 through 30, something major shifts. Her curiosity is no longer passive. It's now deeply invested. She's no longer just wondering why you disappeared. She's truly trying to understand it. The silence has lasted long enough that it's no longer a passing phase. It's now a part of the fabric of this relationship, and she's not sitting back anymore, hoping for things to go back to the way they were. No, now she's reaching out, but with a new sense of vulnerability. Gone are the casual attempts to stir up your attention. Now she's genuinely trying to reconnect. She might send a message that's more honest than anything she's sent before. She might open up about how she's been feeling, perhaps admitting that she doesn't know where you stand anymore, or asking directly if you're okay. This time, it's not a test. It's an attempt to truly understand what happened and to see if there's a path forward. But here's the interesting part. Her approach is different now. She's not expecting anything from you. No immediate response, no sudden reconnection. She's reaching out because she genuinely wants to understand the absence. She's letting go of any expectations and coming from a place of emotional honesty and vulnerability. Now this is the key moment, and it's one we can all learn from. How many times do we try to reconnect with people, but we do it with expectations? We want them to say the right thing, to respond in the way we need them to give us the validation we're craving. But what if instead we simply reached out with no strings attached? What if we stopped expecting a certain outcome and allowed the connection to evolve naturally? At this stage, she's not just testing you anymore, she's learning to let go of the need to control the outcome, and that's where true emotional growth happens. It's not about demanding answers or forcing a reconnection. It's about allowing both people to come to terms with what's happened, to reflect on the time spent apart, and to see if there's room to build something new. So, I want to ask, have you ever reached out to someone not to get them back, but just to understand where things stand? What does it feel like to let go of expectations and truly show up in a vulnerable way? Conclusion. By days 21 through 30, the shift in the relationship is undeniable. She's no longer stuck in uncertainty. Instead, she's deeply invested in understanding not just where you've been, but where you both stand in this new dynamic. The silence has forced her to look inward, to reflect, and to reach out with vulnerability and honesty. It's a powerful transformation that happens when silence is allowed to do its work. And this is where the magic happens, both in relationships and in life. Silence, when used intentionally, forces us to confront ourselves, our fears, and our true desires. It disrupts our expectations and challenges us to grow. It teaches us the value of vulnerability and the strength that comes from letting go of control. So, as we move forward, think about this. What would happen if you embraced silence in your own relationships? What if you allowed the absence to create the space for something new to grow, rather than rushing in to fill it with words and actions? The answer, I believe, is transformative. Stay tuned, because we're just scratching the surface. There's much more to come as we explore how silence changes the dynamic, not just in relationships, but in our own personal journeys. Let's continue this journey together. Conclusion. The true meaning of disappearing. Now that we've journeyed through the power of silence and the transformation it can bring, it's time to reflect on the deeper lesson that comes with disappearing, when done intentionally and with clarity. You might be wondering, why does disappearing matter so much? Why is it so powerful? The truth is, absence, when not driven by anger or manipulation, can serve as a profound mirror. It reflects back not just the other person's feelings, but yours as well. It shows you what's really important, and that includes your worth, your peace, and your self-respect. But more than anything, it teaches you that your value doesn't depend on anyone else's validation. Let that sink in for a moment. Think about it. How often do we seek approval from others? Whether it's from a partner, a friend, or even colleagues, we live in a world that constantly measures our value against someone else's expectations. The pressure to fit into predefined roles, to meet standards set by others, can feel overwhelming. But here's the breakthrough. True self-worth comes from within. It's something you claim, not something you ask permission for. Now let's take a closer look at what happens when you decide to stop chasing after someone's approval, when you stop trying to be seen, when you choose to exist in your own presence rather than seeking validation from others. The man who remembers his worth doesn't need anyone else to remind him of it. And perhaps most importantly, if someone forgets him, it's not a reflection of his worth, but a reflection of their inability to truly see him for who he is. This is where the real power lies, in your ability to exist, to be present, and to stand strong in your own identity, regardless of external circumstances. The key takeaway here is that your worth is not up for negotiation. It's not something that others can give to you, and it's certainly not something that others can take away. It's yours by default. Let me share an insight I've learned through personal experience. There's an immense amount of freedom in letting go of the need for constant approval. When you let go of trying to prove yourself, when you stop seeking to be validated by others, you start to live life on your own terms. There's a sense of clarity that comes with realizing that your value doesn't hinge on anyone's recognition, and that silence in this context is not a sign of weakness or abandonment. It's a declaration of self-respect. Think about it. How often do we keep showing up trying to prove that we matter? We send that extra text, write that message, ask for that affirmation, hoping that someone will give us what we think we're lacking. But what happens when we step back and embrace silence? We stop chasing, and instead we let our presence speak for itself. We become the center of our own world, no longer dependent on others to tell us we're valuable. So, here's the question I want you to reflect on. How would your life change if you stopped seeking validation from others? How would it feel to stand in your own power, fully aware of your worth without needing anyone's permission to feel good about yourself? The journey of disappearing is not about punishment or playing games. It's about self-discovery. It's about stepping away from the noise and allowing yourself to breathe in the stillness, to reclaim your sense of self, and to remember that you are enough, just as you are. In this journey, silence becomes a powerful tool, not to create distance, but to create depth. It allows you to reconnect with your true self, without the distractions, without the need for external validation. And when you stand firm in that knowledge, you don't need anyone else to see your worth, because you already do. In conclusion, the act of disappearing is not a weakness, nor is it a tactic. It's a statement of self-respect. It's a message to the world that your value isn't up for debate. And if others fail to see that, it's not your problem. It's theirs. Your worth is not defined by anyone else's perception. You are worthy because you say so, not because someone else grants you permission. So take a moment to appreciate that silence. It's not empty. It's full of meaning, full of self-respect, and full of the quiet power that comes with knowing you are enough, without needing anyone to remind you of it. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, stay strong, stay silent when needed, and always remember, your worth is yours alone. If you found value in today's video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Inner Stoic Voice. Join our community of like-minded individuals who are committed to growth, self-respect, and finding strength in stillness. Your support helps us continue to create content that empowers you to live life on your own terms. Stay tuned for more, and remember, true power comes from within.